everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Pooja, and if you're coming back to the channel, thanks so much for coming back, and if you're new, thanks so much for stopping by. Before we get started, as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment below if you have something to say about what I had to say. Now, today's video I'm very excited for. I'm going to be doing The Bar in the Bookcase tag by Jaylen over at The Bar in the Bookcase. I love this tag and I love his channel, so you should definitely check out all of his videos. Nobody tagged me in this, but I thought it was a fun tag, so I was gonna just do it anyway. Of course, I have a drink with me today. I have this little version of a Moscow Mule that I like to make, so I always put fruit in mine. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I usually put blueberries, but we didn't have any today, so I've put strawberries instead. And yeah, and then it's just gin and ginger beer, so just kind of mix that together. And I really like this. It's one of my favorite drinks and it's super easy to make. So yeah, so that's what we got here today. Let's take a sip. Amazing. You have to let it like sit a little bit so the strawberry can really sort of get out into the drink, but it's really yum. Okay, so basically this tag is just a list of different drinks, and then based on that you kind of have to come up with a book to recommend based on all those things. So let's just jump right into it. So the first one we have is an old-fashioned, which is a historical fiction recommendation. And for that, I have here The 10th Muse by Catherine Chung. And this sort of takes place in the latter half of the 20th century in the United States. It doesn't really surround any specific event or anything like that. But kind of talks a lot about the experience of being a woman in a field like mathematics. So it basically follows our main character, Catherine, who is a prodigious female mathematician. And of course, she's growing up at a time when women are not really supported in that field, so she's kind of dealing with the sexism of that. She also doesn't really know her mom and like the background that her mom had, so she's really trying to understand her own history, and it actually delves into a lot of events later on in the book relating to World War II, etc., etc. So it's a really, really interesting novel. Catherine Chung writes in a really beautiful way, and it really kind of brings to life the vibe of like the Queen's Gambit a little bit. And when I watched that series on Netflix later, I was like, I feel like the emotions I'm feeling are very similar to the ones that I had while reading The 10th Muse. So I really enjoyed that. And there's also a lot of just really interesting tidbits about like mathematician history that I didn't really know about before, and just really interesting logic puzzles and stuff like that. So it's a great book that I would highly recommend as a historical fiction recommendation. The next prompt is based on a sidecar, which is a book with a strong supporting character, and for that I have Cracking India by Babsi Sidhwa. I've talked about this in multiple videos now, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically this book follows our main character Lenny, who is a child in a Parsi family, and her experience going through partition of India and Pakistan. And I thought that one of the supporting characters in this book, the Aya, who is basically Lenny's nanny, who ends up having to deal with a lot of crap throughout this book, and becomes one of the unfortunate just like victims in many ways of the violence of partition. Her story is just so heart-wrenching. It really kind of hit me at the gut, and I think she was just such a well-developed character, and you really feel for her as she's going through the different tragedies that end up happening to her throughout the course of the book. So I think this book had just, she was amazing. I didn't enjoy hearing about her story because it was very sad, but I really felt for her and really connected with her despite her being just a supporting character in the novel. So I'd recommend that one. And let's have some of this. It's so good. You have to try it. Okay, the next prompt is based on a Manhattan. So of course it is a book that is set in New York. And for that I have The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I honestly there's so many books that are set in New York that are all really good, but this one is just like such an homage to New York that I couldn't have even thought about choosing anything else in this prompt. And so this book is like it's a fantasy book, and it's the first book in a series, but the other ones aren't out yet. And so the basic premise of the fantasy in this is that every city in the world has this kind of like avatar that like represents it and is sort of the life force of the city. But because New York has all of these different aspects in different boroughs, there are actually 5 avatars that are coming together, like Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. And so they all are kind of dealing with this like evil force that is trying to destroy New York as it's being birthed as, you know, a major city of the world. And so I thought it was just a really fun book that really was an homage to New York. I didn't actually know like a ton about the city before. I mean, I visited before, and I recently spent a bunch of time there, but it was something that really made me feel like, oh wow, like there's so much history and so much passion that really underlies what it means to be a New Yorker, and I think that really comes out in this book. So I truly could not have, it would have been sacrilege to pick a different book, because this one is just like an homage to New York. So would recommend this one. The next prompt is a Bloody Mary. So that is a book that scared you or messed you up. And I'm actually going to choose a book that I literally finished last night, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I've been like trying to read more classics this year, but I just can't seem to get into many of them. And I thought, okay, let me try Dracula. That sounds like something more up, it sounds like something I would enjoy. And that book is weird. Like, it really messed me up. I got very scared reading it and reading sort of the description of the Count Dracula and what our main character, Jonathan Harker, kind of is going through. And yeah, it was just very dark and a lot scary, even though I knew the story going into it. So I don't know why I got so scared, but it was really well written, so it really freaked me out. I don't need to go into kind of the overall story of it because everyone knows it's the story of Dracula, but it's actually quite scary. So if you're looking for something to read that will really scare you, I would recommend Dracula. The next prompt is for an espresso martini, and that is a book that kept you reading into the night. And for that, I have Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I think this is not a surprise to anyone. This book is just so good, and it really kind of makes you cling to the narrative. You just kind of want to keep reading and keep knowing what happens to the next descendant in the family line. So essentially what happens in this book, for those of you who may not know, it follows two sisters from Ghana. One of the sisters, her family lineage actually kind of stays in Ghana and becomes almost like a royal family there. The other sister is actually sent over to the US as a slave, and her family ends up in a family kind of growing in the American South as slaves at first, and then just kind of dealing with being Black in America and that experience. And it's just such a stunningly written novel, and you just want to keep finding out what happens to the next generation, and it sort of follows 7 generations throughout history. So just beautifully written, makes you like not want to put it down, and so I think it's a great book for this prompt. The next book is a Sazerac, and a book that left you disoriented. I think this is a great prompt to go with that drink, but I think the one I would recommend here is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I just read this year after it was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and this book is just very whimsical. It kind of starts off in this like world where it like the entire world doesn't really have any people in it except for 2 people that we know of, our main character Piranesi and this other guy called the Other. And there are some like skeletons that are also there in this world, but other than that, he doesn't really know of anyone else. And the whole world is basically a bunch of like hallways essentially, and Piranesi kind of bides his time like finding food and kind of keeping track of what exists in his world, exploring the different hallways. That's all he does. And so at first it starts out as this like fantasy novel, but then kind of jumps into this psychological thriller territory where you're not really sure if the main character is crazy or if other people are crazy or if there's actually a fantasy world. So it's a really just interesting question that never really, it gets answered, but not really. And so it left me feeling a bit disoriented. I had just like a lot of questions, but in a good way. So I think that's one book that I would highly recommend if you're looking to be disoriented like you would be after having a Sazerac. So the next prompt is for a Long Island iced tea, and it is a book that is doing too much, bonus points if it works anyway. This was one that I kind of struggled to think of an answer for, but I think one that probably comes to mind is The Yacubian Building by Ala al-Aswani, who is an Egyptian author. And it kind of takes place in Cairo and follows the stories of all these different characters from different socioeconomic strata and just all the different like issues that are kind of tying them together in modern day Cairo and how they kind of deal with them. There were some points in that book when I felt like there were too many different characters and too many different stories that were all kind of intertwined, but I was having trouble sort of keeping up with the different characters as it switched around perspectives. So I thought in that sense, maybe it was doing a little too much, but I think at the end, all of the different stories are brought together really nicely. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, but I think there were points of the book where I was like, wait, what was happening with this character a couple chapters ago? I don't really remember like what the significance was. So in that sense, I would say maybe it's doing too much, but that's not a very strong answer. I feel like I don't really have a strong answer for this one. The next prompt is for a Negroni, and it is a book with a love triangle. And for this one, again, for some reason, I feel like I haven't read that many books with a love triangle in them recently. But one that comes to mind is the Devabad trilogy, or The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is like kind of a love triangle between our main characters, Nari, who is this girl living in Cairo who eventually finds out that she's sort of the descendant of this line of royalty among this fantasy world of Devabad, where there are these magical creatures, people, but basically who have magical powers, who are sort of living under the fabric of, you know, human society in the 1800s. So Nari, and then this character Dara, who is just a dreamy character, but also very flawed in many ways. And then the prince of Devabad, Ali, who sort of comes into the picture as well once Nari travels to Devabad with Dara. And I thought like their love triangle is like not exactly a love triangle, but in some ways it kind of is, in that, you know, they, like, Nari has feelings for both Dara and Ali at different points of the book, but at some points it feels like Ali is more of kind of almost like a brother character, but also a love interest. But I think, you know, just the way that the relationships are explored throughout the fantasy series is really, really good. And also it's just a really excellent series. So I kind of wanted to stick it in here somehow. So would highly recommend anyone to read it. But yes, there is a bit of a love triangle in it. I need to drink this faster so I finish it by the end of the video. Okay, so the next one that we have here is A Bay Breeze, so a book with light, chill, heartwarming vibes. For this one, I would recommend Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. So this book essentially follows sort of in an alternate reality that the son of the President of the United States falls in love with the Prince of England. Now, it's not based on reality at all, but sort of the Prince character is loosely based on Prince Harry, I would assume. And so it's a really, really fun, chill, heartwarming kind of book that just explores their sort of, you know, hate to love relationship. I kind of enjoyed that trope in it, and talks about sort of their just love story, essentially, how they deal with how people are perceiving them and the press sort of coming in the middle of everything, and just being these two like celebrity characters just trying to live their lives. So there are some like kind of really sad parts in the book, but overall it's just a very chill, heartwarming, cute book that I really, really enjoyed. So I would recommend as a book with light, chill, heartwarming vibes that you probably won't be able to put down once you start because it's really good. Okay, so the next one is A Dark and Stormy. So a book that's dark, thrilling, and menacing. Bonus points if the setting matches. Could not think of anything better here. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Read this book last year, absolutely loved it. It's kind of a horror thriller that takes place in the Mexican countryside, and it follows our main character who is basically sent to this creepy like castle type house thing and has to live with the family there because her cousin, who has married into that family, appears to be going a little bit crazy, so she has to go kind of figure out what's happening. She becomes friends with the younger son of the household, but there's creepy stuff going on, and then it gets extremely creepy, second half of the book, and it becomes sort of a full-on horror story. It is absolutely, you know, I think this gets 2 bonus points because the setting is so freaking creepy and it's so well done and really scared the wits out of me, and so I really, really enjoyed it. I also finished reading this book at like 3 a.m. and then literally could not sleep afterwards. So, all right, and we're at the last prompt, so I gotta finish. Okay, almost there. All right, we're done. I'm gonna eat those strawberries later. And so the last prompt is a Martini or a classic recommendation. And I have a copy of this book, but I'm like just in the process of moving a bunch of furniture right now, so I could not find it for the moment, but it's somewhere in my giant stack of books right now. and that is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This is my favorite classic. I love it so much. I know there's a lot of problematic stuff in there, and Jules Verne was definitely, white man writing books in the 1800s, so has a lot of problematic views, and I totally recognize and understand the problematic elements in the book. However, I do really just enjoy the sense of adventure that it conveys. I think it was one of the books of that era that really inspired people to look beyond the borders of, the confines of their everyday lives and think about the world as a whole, and just think about sort of the possibilities of travel and what that really entailed. And I think it was published sort of on the cusp of this, couple of centuries that people have really actually, everyday people, not just like conquerors and governments and soldiers and stuff like that, but everyday people have actually traveled across the world and gotten to know people of different cultures. And I think it really just represents how technology has brought us all together in that way. So I think that part of it just really inspires me a lot. But yes, there are very, very problematic elements in it. I wish they weren't there. But recognizing that it was written by someone in an era where those were some of the prevailing views, I think that's just something you have to recognize going in. So I will put that there as sort of a warning for anyone who's going to pick up that book. But I really just love it. It's one of my favorite sort of Western classics, I would say. And so those are all of my recommendations for this tag. This was a lot of fun, so thank you to Jaylen for putting this together. I'm not going to tag anyone really, but if you're interested in doing a video like this, you should definitely do it because I think it's a fun tag to do. And so that's all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I am going to go finish the last couple of sips of this and eat these strawberries, but also if you make this drink, let me know. It's really, really good, so I would recommend. So yeah, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as usual, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one, and bye-bye.